October 5th, 1973. On the banks of the Suez Canal, 100,000 men were waiting in total silence. No radios, no lights. Just the sound of the water. Across the water stood the Bar Lev Line, the most expensive fortification in the world. $500 million of sand and concrete that the world said would never fall. They didn't have atomic bombs. They had something better. A solution so simple it would baffle the greatest generals in Europe and America. 10 a.m. The sun was high over the Suez. To the Israeli scouts watching from the towers across the water, it looked like just another boring day of Egyptian exercises. The deception was working. Egyptian soldiers were ordered to walk around without helmets. Some were even fishing in the canal. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Behind the dunes, the largest military machine in the Middle East was being fueled. Engines were kept off. Orders were whispered. The world was being tricked into a false sense of security. The engineers had found the flaw. The wall wasn't made of steel. It was made of sand. And they had the key to wash it all away. At 11 a.m., the masks came off. The teacups were put away. The owners of the land checked their ammunition one last time. In 3 hours, the world would never be the same. 2:05 p.m., the silence of the Sinai didn't just break, it exploded. 220 Egyptian ghosts screamed across the water at 1,000 kilometers per hour. For the soldiers on the ground, that roar was the sound of 6 years of waiting finally coming to an end. The air strike was the signal. Was Chimi. For 1,000 tons of explosives began to rain down on the Bar Lev Line, the largest artillery barrage since. World War II was turning the invincible wall into a graveyard. The world's eyes were on the plains, but the war would be won in these rubber boats. 8,000 men began to paddle. No armor, no cover, just faith and a mission. The towers that had watched Egypt for years were falling. The impenetrable shield of Israel was being ripped apart in the first 15 minutes. 95 legends have crossed the canal. Be the 100th subscriber to step onto the sand of the Sinai. The crossing has begun. Subscribe to join us. The boats hit the mud. The soldiers didn't wait for the smoke to clear. They weren't carrying ladders or explosives. They were carrying hoses. The world thought Egypt needed a miracle to break the Bar Lev Line. The Egyptian engineers knew they just needed physics. High-pressure water versus $500 million of sand. And then it happened. The impenetrable wall started to melt. In minutes, the high-pressure cannons were doing what 1,000 bombs couldn't. They were washing the wall into the canal. 60 gaps holes in the heart of the fence. The Israeli generals couldn't believe their eyes. Their invincible shield was being dissolved by the water of the Nile. The wall was gone. Now, it was time for the iron. Across the Suez, the Egyptian engineers had built bridges out of thin air. The tanks began to roar. Thousands of tons of steel moving into the Sinai for the first time in 6 years. The owners of the land were back with fire and power. Look at the Bar Lev Line now. It wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a doorway. The Israeli plan to hold the canal forever had collapsed in just a few hours. Every soldier knew the risk, but they also knew the legacy. They were fighting for their grandfathers, their fathers, and the children they left at home. The crossing was a success, but the war was just beginning. Ahead of them lay the deep desert and the largest tank battle since the dawn of time. In just a few hours, the impossible was done. The wall was broken, the canal was crossed, and the map of the Middle East was changed forever. It wasn't just a military victory. It was the return of dignity. The 1973 October War proved that the owners of the land would never give up on their home. The legacy of the Egyptian soldier lives on, not in the books of the West, but in the heart of every person who knows that no wall is too high to break. 95 legends have honored this history today. If you believe the truth deserves to be told, be the 100th subscriber and join our legacy. Subscribe to keep the story alive.